Hey everybody, this is Zack, and in this Blender tutorial I will pretty much be showing you just the basic fundamentals of Blender. If this is your first time using Blender, or you've opened it up and looked at it, but you don't really know where to go from here, this is a good tutorial to start with. So, obviously the first thing to catch your eye is this 3D view right here. And how Blender's layout works is all of this right here is one window, and this is called the 3D viewport. Down here you can see we have the animation timeline, and over here we have a buttons window. Or at least that's what it was called in the earlier versions. What's it called now? It's called the properties window. Okay, so we have the properties window, and up here we have a little organizer which shows you everything that's in your scene. Now, as you can see, all of these windows are separate, and you can make them as big or as small as you want them. I prefer to have mine about this size, a little bit bigger than default size. So, how you can move around this 3D viewport right here is, if you have a 3-button mouse, then you would use the middle mouse button to move around, and if you scroll in and out, that's how you zoom. If you don't have a 3-button mouse, then you can emulate one in the Properties tab. So if you can go into the user preferences, and it will bring up, well, pretty much just the preferences for Blender. And if you go here to the input, then you can see emulate 3-button mouse. Now, by default, right-clicking in Blender is to select an object or a vertice, and to left-click, hold on. If you left-click, you will move this 3D cursor around, and that's all left-click really does. So, I find left-clicking to be more important than right-clicking, and I don't know, I'd rather select with the left-click button. So what I do is I change mine over to select with left. But if you have to emulate your mouse, you must have it on right. I don't really know why, but that's just how it works. If you haven't emulated, then all you do is, I think you press Alt-click. Yeah, you press Alt-click, and then you can move. But I'm guessing you have a 3-button mouse. If you are using a laptop, you might not have a number pad, so you can click Emulate Number Pad, and then the numbers at the top will be what you use. So, to prevent yourself from having to do this every single time you load up Blender, you can click Save as Default, and everything that you have set now will be what it is when you load it up. However, you probably won't want to do that unless you have loaded up the factory settings first and then changed everything you wanted. Because if you have a scene set up, or any sort of materials or any settings that you wouldn't want being set up as default would still be there. However, this could all be used to your advantage. There are several ways you can customize Blender in your own way. Say if you wanted to have a selection of default materials, I mean, I'd never do that, but if you want like metal, glass, or whatever, you could start up Blender with those materials right there, which could be helpful. Or if you don't like the way this is all laid out, you can edit everything. If you go over here where the view splits and you are able to drag, if you right click there, then you can click split area, and then it will split the viewport in half, whatever you want to split in half. And if you go to this little button right here, then you can change the type of window this is. So this will be a UV image editor. So now we've got the 3D viewport and a UV image editor, and you could save that as default if you wanted to, but I prefer the way it is to start. Alright, to get into this 3D view right here, I have taught you how to move around. Well, not exactly. If you click in the middle mouse, you can rotate, and if you zoom in and out, you can zoom in and out by moving the middle mouse button. However, if you want to pan the view, just hold Shift and then click in the middle mouse, and then you will pan. To go into side, or front, side, and top view, it's just 1, 3, and 7. Front is 1, 3 is side, and 7 is top. If you want to go to the opposite side of each of these, it's just hold down Control and then press 1, 3, or 7. So if you want to go to back, it's Control 1, left, Control 3, bottom, Control 7. Another function with the number pad is pressing 5 to switch from perspective to orthographic mode. Now in orthographic mode, what this means is that there will be no depth to anything. All objects will appear the same size, well, up to their scale, and you can't actually, as you can see if I move this down, that this side right here is the same size as this. When in perspective, it would vanish. There are some pros and cons to working with these. As you can see, if I press Shift and D to duplicate this cube in orthographic mode, I can, if I rotate this around and I try to zoom in on this cube right here, you can see that this cube gets in the way, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about this because it's not actually moving, it's just zooming in. If I go into perspective, then you can see that it's actually moving through the space, and I can get in front of that cube, or go through the cube if I have to. Now orthographic mode is very helpful if you're working in the front, side, or top view, so that nothing is in the way, and if you drag along, everything will stay where it needs to be. It's just a little bit more distracting, harder to work with if it's in perspective mode when you're in the top, side, or front view. Now I'm going to press X to delete this current cube right here and just work with this one in the middle. So what we have here is, well, actually no, actually there's another number pad function that's important. If you press the period key, you will zoom in on the object, and that's very helpful, and I have realized something recently that kind of made me mad before. If you press 0, then you can zoom into the camera. Now this is whatever you'll see in the camera, and to actually view the scene in its final, press F12, and this will give you a render. Now as you can see, if you have the camera selected and you move it with G, press the G key, and then you can move any object, then you can see that that's where it appears. So the actual 3D view isn't your camera, so you have to make sure that you have your camera set up properly. Now a good way to move your camera is holding Shift and F, and then it will put you into fly mode. And if you scroll in your mouse wheel, move it around, sort of like a first-person shooter type thing. However, it kind of moves like there's no gravity, so you can't really stop it very well. It can get kind of annoying. As you can see, the 3D view is a little bit off, and that can be caused by fly mode. If you press Shift F and then you scroll in very far or something like that, there are some things that can screw up your 3D view, and as you can see, if you scroll in, it's just way too much. You can't get any precise movements, and it's just really hard to rotate around the scene. And that would always make me very mad if this happened to happen, because I didn't really know how to get past this. But if you just press the period key on the object you have selected, then it'll just zoom to it, and then everything will be back to normal. So that's a good tip, because I didn't know that before. Now here it's interacting with the objects. As you can see, we have these little pointers right here, and this is called the 3D manipulator. If you press this middle white circle, then you can drag around based on where the 3D view's camera is. Now if you just want to lock it to the y-axis, which is the green, then you just press the green one. If you want to lock it to the Z, same thing, X is red. Now, if you want to change the type of pointers, then you can go down here into these buttons right here, and this one is rotation and this one is scale. So if you have rotation up, then you can rotate around the Z, X, and Y. Same with scale, Y, X, Y, X, and Z. And once again, if you grab the center, it'll just scale it completely uniform, and it will, if you grab the center, it will rotate based on the camera's orientation. So if you press Control Z, we'll just kind of bring the cube back to the way it was when it started. Alright. This little button will also get rid of this, and sometimes this 3D manipulator does get in the way, especially if you're editing vertices, if you have a very high polygon mesh. However, I do kind of like to keep it on when I'm in object mode, moving an object around the scene. If you have it off, then you can do the same functions as with it being on by using its shortcut keys. So for moving the actual cube around, if you press G, then you can move around based on the camera's orientation. While G is selected, you can press Z to lock it to the Z, X, or Y. Now, R is to rotate, and again, based on the camera's orientation. If you just want to rotate around the Z, X, or Y, then you just press those buttons while rotation is selected. And to scale the object, you just press S, and then Z, X, or Y. So down here in these buttons, which are all just affiliated with this 3D view right here, actually, I'll just cover this real quick. Every single one of these little windows has their own row of buttons specifically for it. So down here you can see the 3D views, the animation timelines buttons, which shows the frames and some keyframing options, as well as this, the buttons window here, has the different panels you can access. And none of these buttons have to do with any of these other windows, so changing something on here won't change something over here, for example. So if you're looking for something specific to over here, then you're not going to find it over here. So down here on the buttons for the 3D view, if you click these, it shows you the different layers you can get. Now a layer is handy if you want to hide an object while keeping it in the same spot, or say you probably want to keep your lights on a separate layer than your scene, that way, and maybe some details, that way you can get rid of the details on the fly and render a preview or something like that. Also, the layers are kind of handy for compositing, but I won't go into that. Also, when you move, because I just thought of this, it shows the type of snapping, but to snap, by default is set to the grid. I'll just go into the front view. If you press G, you can see that you can just move it around, but if you hold Control, it will snap to the lines on the grid. And this can be handy for placing something exact. Sorry, I just went back into that other layer. So if you want to place something exact or something like that, then pressing Control or holding down Control is handy. You can also do that in rotation. Or can you? Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, as you can see over on this side, we have the object tools, and I don't know, I don't really use the object tool panel that much because a lot of these can be accessed through hotkeys. Pretty much the only one I'll use is the shading type. If you press smooth, then you'll see that this cube looks kind of strange. If you have it on flat, then you can see that one side is shaded and it's very distinct. If you have smooth, then it sort of smooths out the edges in the render. Now, it doesn't look very good now. In fact, it looks like crap. It just doesn't look very good on low polygon objects, but having smooth on a very high polygon object that's supposed to look smooth is very handy. But I'll just set that back to flat. Ignore this Unreal Tools. That's an add-on. So if you don't have it, then that's okay. That's just for exporting objects for the Unreal Engine. Alright, so if this is also part of the 3D window, it's not its own panel. So to get rid of this, just press T. Now you have more space. There's also another panel that comes out on this side, and you can bring it out by pressing N, and these are the transform tools. This shows you the exact location on the grid, the exact rotation of the object you have, and some other little things like adding a background image or the display type. And I don't tend to keep these up either while I'm working, so I usually have everything hidden so I have more room to work. Now, all we have here is a cube. So to add another object, you can go up here and click Add, and you can add all sorts of stuff: cameras, lamps, curves, armatures. If you just go up to Mesh, you can add another cube or a sphere. I'll just add a sphere, and now we have a sphere to work with. So it's all good, we have this that we can drag around in place, but how do we edit this? How do we change the sphere? Because you can't do that here, and that's because the 3D viewport is in object mode. Now if you go down here and select object mode, then you can see there are different types of modes to select. However, if you just want to edit your mesh, just go to edit mode. Another easy way to get into edit mode and object mode is just by pressing tab, and I'd recommend doing that. Now as you can see, if you press tab into edit mode, that the buttons down here will change, and also if you bring these out, the buttons will change as well. So each mode kind of has their own selection of buttons. If you go here, I definitely never use any of these when I'm in edit mode because there are shortcut keys for all of these. However, if you don't know a shortcut key and you're looking for something in specific, you might find it if you scroll through this. So don't tear your hair out if you're looking for a certain command in particular. Now if we zoom in on the object in edit mode, you can see there are little points at every single point where the faces meet an edge, and these are vertexes. Now you can select multiple vertices by holding shift and clicking. And if you want to select a loop, which is a series of vertices connected to each other, then hold Alt and select. Now you can have a combination of holding shift, so now that I have all these selected, I can press shift and select more, or I can hold shift and Alt and select a whole new loop. So these are important to know. Now if you don't want to select just a point on the mesh, then you can select an edge by going down here into these three buttons and select the one with the line. Then you can select each individual edge, and the same selection rules apply. If you want to just select an entire face, then you can select these. And to move them is the same way. You can use the 3D manipulator, or you can press G. You can rotate them with R and scale them with S. Now this little button here is important. It will show you, so right now you can just kind of see that the object is solid. If you select this, now you can see all the underlying wireframe and all the vertices. So now you can select vertices through the object. Now this is handy in some cases. Say we go into side view and we press B to do a box select. and we select all of these vertices. Now as you can see, every single vertice, all the vertices in this half have been selected. If we go back into front view and we turn this off, I think I turned off, okay, no I didn't, and we turn this off and we press it, and you can only see that the ones directly in front of us have been selected. So it can be handy and it can not be handy sometimes. If you have a lot of vertices, then sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what you're selecting, or there's so many in the way that you have to click exactly where it is. All you have to do is just turn this off. Now this tool down here is called the proportional editing tool. If you click proportional editing, then if you move it, vertices will drag along with it. Now by scrolling in the mouse wheel while you're rotating, grabbing, or scaling, then you can change the intensity that it pulls it with. You scale it down or up. And this can be handy for, it's kind of squishing right now, so you wouldn't have to edit everything yourself. If you click connected proportional editing, it will only move vertices directly connected to this object. Alright, so yeah, I guess that's, well, I mean, that's not it. For the actual modeling tools, I'll show you the modeling tools on this cube. If we go into the side mode, well, it's not that necessary, but here, I'll just select this entire face, and an important key to know is the E key, and that extrudes a face or a vertice. And as you can see, we have more polygons to work with. So if I rotate and drag and just select, I can just go around, go around in a sort of bad looking arch shape real quick. Okay, well this looks like crap, but it's no longer a cube anymore. I'll press Ctrl Z. If you press Ctrl Z while in object mode, it will get rid of all the changes you have made in edit mode since you were last in object mode. So kind of be careful of that. Now another important tool is the subdivide tool, and you can access the subdivide tool and a bunch of other tools by pressing the W key, and it will bring up your specials menu. Now you can click subdivide, merge, smooth, flip normals. These are the ones I use the most. I'm going to go with subdivide. Now that I've clicked subdivide, you have noticed that it has quadrupled the amount of polygons. Every time you subdivide, it will quadruple the amount of polygons. You probably don't want to do this too much to your mesh, because having more polygons isn't actually a very good thing. There are better ways to add more polygons, just for the render in specific. Now, another good tool that I use all the time is the loop cut tool. And if you press Ctrl R, you can see that it brings in this sort of pink line that goes around the cube. And it will go around any direction that's perpendicular to the line you will be creating. So if I just create one right here, and I click, then I can move it around, and then I place it, and I click again. Now if I want to add more than one, just scroll the mouse wheel up, and you can add as many as you want. Now as you can see that the loop cut has just wrapped around the cube, and that's because of the topology flow of the faces. Topology isn't a very hard concept to get, but it's definitely kind of hard to know exactly how to make a mesh with the proper topology. And topology basically is just the faces kind of merging into each other. As you can see, if we go to this circle right here, or the sphere, and we add a loop cut, it will go all the way around the mesh. Now, it's pretty handy to have the topology working in specific directions. It's one thing to model something that looks like what it is, but it's another thing to actually kind of build it based on its shapes. You could build a human head just kind of by slapping it together, or you could have rings around the mouth and the eye so it will deform nicely. So you have to know how to model properly. But that's about all I'll cover in object and edit mode. And the other thing I'm going to cover in this tutorial is these buttons over here.